On this week's show, discussing storytelling in construction with Todd Weyandt from Applied Software. In this week's news, acquisitions, ancient riddles, integration summit, and more. All right. If you didn't already know, I have my man Nathan Wood with the CDX hat. Maybe a little predecessor to the future of what we might be doing. How you doing, buddy?
Little foreshadowing. Oh man, I'm sore. I got 2 days in a row of skiing up at Breck. You know, it's not quite as good as Vail, but I'll take what I can get. And yeah, excited to get back into the week.
Did you get out there solo, or were you chasing JMO around?
On Sunday, Liz was extremely nice. Gave me the morning. In 2 hours, I got almost 13,000 vertical feet. So now I've become obsessed with the measurement now, with that whole Epic Mix app, as Jeff, I know you're all into. So we'll have to start doing some gamification here coming up.
Yeah. If you guys don't know, over here in the mountains of Colorado and at all of Vail Resorts mountains, you actually can run your Epic Pass, and they have little scanners at the lift, and they tell you your vertical feet, and then they can create a game so you can go try and beat your friends. So you can beat your friends on days, beat your friends on vertical. So some point we'll have to have like a throwdown. If you're here for the integration summit and for the ski day, maybe we'll see how many feet we can do. Speaking of which, I have Todd Weyandt with me. Todd,
how's it
going? Good morning, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to be here. I'm not going to partake in that gamification because you guys are going to crush me in my 1 day out for the conference skiing. So
we'll handicap it. No, we'll handicap perfect. It. Don't worry. You just have to be honest with your answers to the handicap.
There you go.
What's the handicap have something to do with like how many days skied per year? And it's a multiplier, or is it an age multiplier? Where are we going with this? Because we're going to get in trouble no matter where we go.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, let's go there, because this is part of what we're going to talk about is what you measure matters, right?
That's right. Bringing up those difficult conversations.
Day accomplishment based on annual exposure and age coefficient. We could come up with an interesting algorithm to get to a true who had the best day MVP.
Yeah, who has the best day? We've already lost a few of you who aren't skiing, but that's all right.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right. We'll be back.
We're all data nerds.
We got a little bit more about Todd that I think y'all know. And if you're listening in and you don't know Todd already, then you haven't been in the podcast world for very long. So we will be back in a second. Back to the cause of our show. We need more bold leaders willing to be vulnerable and open about mental health. This doesn't mean airing your dirty laundry, but being able to say, I've taken a mental health assessment and I learned some things about myself that are really helping me. Or I'm investing as much in my mental health as my physical health by practicing self-care, talking to a therapist, or engaging in my favorite hobbies. Or it might even be, I took this great training on mental health recently and I learned X, Y, and Z. That comes from Mandy Keim, Director of Safety, AGC of Washington. Thank you, Mandy, for that tidbit. As always, tune in. We'll have more tidbits as we get more of our partners along the way. If you need any resources, go to preventconstructionsuicide.com or dial or call 988 from your mobile phone as a text or call resource at any time. The crew is back on the YouTube. That's right. YouTube.com/@the ConTech crew. You can watch all the new episodes, and we're putting up new snippets there for you to check out. So be sure to tune in and smash that subscribe button. We need y'all. Before we get into our guest interview, I spoke with Robert Scheer, VP of Strategy and Business Development at OpenSpace, about how they can give you a photographic memory of your job site with 360 images. I'm here with Robert Scheer, VP of Strategy and Business Development for OpenSpace. Robert, tell us a little bit about what is OpenSpace.
OpenSpace is a 360 job site capture, review, and tracking tool. Think of it as an up-to-the-minute Google Street View of your project that people can view anywhere, anytime. Some people also refer to it as like total project recall, right? So what if you could have a photographic memory for all your projects for all time in case something came up in the future? So that's really what it is. How do you use it? Let me grab my camera. You simply just attach a 360 camera to your hard hat, open our app on your phone, open the floor plan, tap where you are and walk. We take care of the rest. So as you walk, we take 2 360 images per second. You come back, upload them to the cloud, and we process that all together, stitch them together, pin all those images to your plans, and deliver it back to you as the navigable 360 environment for everyone to use and share. And typically we deliver it back to you in like 30 to 60 minutes.
And we are back. And I'm just going to introduce Todd Weyandt. You know, Todd's the director of marketing and applied software, but he's far more well known as the award-winning host and current construction podcast of the year, Bridging the Gap podcast. Todd, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I get the current on a technicality, but I will take it as a competitive person. I will take it. Rating doesn't matter, though. It hasn't been a competition since I got that a couple years ago.
Hey, it's raining until it's not raining, my friend. And that is awesome. I'm super stoked to have you on the show. I can't believe we really haven't had you on the show. You are one of the pioneers. Bridging the Gap's been around a long time. I've learned a lot from a lot of people, but obviously there's a story behind Todd. So how in the heck did you get here to applied software, to running an award-winning podcast in the construction business?
It's funny because I really have no business running a construction podcast because that's not my background at all. I'm a marketer at heart, still obviously director of marketing at Applied. So that's where my passion is. My whole career has been in the marketing space. And then about 8.5 years ago, I stumbled into the construction industry at Applied Software, just randomly. Actually, my dad gave me a job opening, said, you should check this out. And it was Applied Software. And the rest is history. Came into the construction industry, just totally fell in love with the space. And when we started the podcast, which, man, that's like 4 or 5 years ago, when it first kind of started the iteration of it, this is spoiler, and sorry for construction people. We actually thought it was going to be more leaning on the AE side of AEC. But what we found was they didn't want to talk to us. It was the construction industry and the GCs and the subs that were like, yeah, let's talk. Let's have these conversations. Let's, open up. Let's share what we're doing. Let's talk about the trends. Let's talk about kind of the business cases that we're seeing and that we're doing and share the information, which was awesome. And so we just leaned into that and really just totally fell in love with the people. And then I got fascinated with the again, as a marketer, the marketing problem in construction, that the outside of the industry, people have such a poor, misguided view of what's happening in construction that they don't see the technology, they don't see the innovation, they don't see the creative problem solving, they don't see the freaking smart people that are in the space. They don't get to see any of that. So it kind of became a mission of mine of let's try to change that and let's bring construction coolness, make construction cool again, bring it to those outside the industry and kind of pump up the people in the industry that, no, you guys are doing awesome things here.
Yeah, you've that's a long chain of events to go through, but I think it's kind of interesting. I want to kind of stick on that. We thought it would be the A&E and it's the C. Mm-hmm. I think consistently we hear that, but it goes against some of the trends that you see in graphics and whatnot. Oh, the C's not interested in innovation. They're not interested in technology. And I think our experiences shared prove differently. Was there like a point in time in that, or was it just, was that a surprise to you? Obviously it was a surprise to you, but was there a point in time where that became kind of evident? Or any, guest or anything you had?
Pretty early on, it became evident because, like I said, we reached out to a ton of people to come on and share their experiences and talk about what they're doing around innovation. And it was crickets on the AE front. But construction, it was like, I don't think I got a no from somebody in construction to come on and talk. And then, at the same time, we were launching and starting the MEP Force conference. And so that also gave me a good window into the subs and the skilled trades and being able to have those conversations as well too. And just seeing the willingness of people that are competitors coming into the same space, the same room and saying, yeah, we might be fighting out there to get the job, but in here, we're going to share what we're doing. We're going to, really open up the book, so to speak, and share what's going on, share the nitty gritty. And they call each other out at the conference. It's one of my favorite things, sitting in the room of sorry, I'm going to call out Darren. I think anybody that's been in a room with Darren, he's going to call somebody out and be like, what you're doing, it's not right. That's stupid. But at the same time, he's going to come around and say, hey, here's what you should do. This is what we've been doing, and it's worked really well for us. And he's sharing that to a competitor. I think that's just something really cool and special about construction that you don't get in a lot of other industries.
It's Darren Young, right, that you're referring to?
It is Darren Young.
We know, we all know you've got a great blog post, and he's the most technical expert if you want to read into his Revit blog posts and other things, but he's also a very verbose challenger. And so I think it's a great yin and yang, like the talent that you bring, Todd, as a marketer, as a storyteller, as someone that can distill down all those thoughts that are inside Darren's head into, more meaningful thoughts and actions for those that it impacts. And so I think it's a great example that you bring up, and I can echo that from my experience within the MEP world, especially within MCAA. And I think it is something specifically around union trade contractors and the nature of sharing that they've always sort of had as their competitive advantage, and how that's really accelerated through technology. And that we'll be talking about it this week in Austin. And you're, I think, a very accurate reflection of what's been happening over the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, and it's what I think is fascinating about it is it's really done from the iron sharpens iron perspective of they're really genuinely interested in making the other person better, not just to share how smart they are. They want to see everybody in the industry do better, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and it's got its own drive, right? It's got its own self-serving prophecy in some ways. We've had this discussion before on a couple of the shows. It's like, if you don't raise all of the contractors around you to start doing fabrication, to start doing BIM and VDC, and there's people out there that are still, sketch it on CAD or paper or stick build it or just figure it out in the field, then they're always an option. And, it's a rising tide. So I'm wondering through that process of learning that there was a view of the industry itself and that this co-opetition existed. What drove you to be so passionate about trying to tell that story and get that information out? Why would you dig in? What was it about that made you want to dig in?
Oh, that's a great question. The first thing that popped into my mind was it seems like such a big injustice to the construction industry, and kind of part of my personality and my psyche. I don't like seeing that. That rubs me the wrong way when it's just a misperception of what. No, that's stupid.
It's the journalist in you, right? That's a very journalistic thing, of the storytellers, which I think is fitting. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's dig in and figure out what's the root cause. Where does it stem from? And this is, I didn't realize when I first started kind of down this mission, if you will, just how pervasive and widespread it goes. Maybe I would have been less ambitious at the start before fully taking it on, because it's just decades and decades obviously in the making, and it's just there's so many facets to it, which maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, but I find that really fascinating that you have the cultural aspect of it, you have the college versus trade school aspect of it, you have I think quite frankly the humility of the construction industry that they're bad at storytelling because they're not focused on themselves. They're focused on just doing the job and getting it done right, and not, okay, well, now I got to go brag about it. That just kind of sits wrong with them. They think that telling the story is bragging, and it's not, but I understand where they're coming from on that. So anyway, there's just a whole lot of different facets to it that is really interesting to me that we can kind of take apart one by one and hopefully try to chip away at that.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on a couple of things, but the bad at storytelling really surprised me. I think we've both run into that. I kind of know where it comes from, because it's hard to tell stories about yourself or your company or what you're doing and not feel as though you're bragging. But ultimately, it's also not good for them as marketers, right? So that has to pull at your marketing heartstrings. So I'm kind of wondering what on the front of bad at storytelling or not getting out there, you've seen them do or could do to get better.
First thing is getting the confidence. And this might sound a little hokey, but the probably the number one thing that I hear the most of when I ask, well, why aren't you telling this? And they're like, well, it's not that interesting. It's not that cool a story. And I'm like, well, that's where you're wrong, because it is a cool story. You're reducing waste in this. You're cleaning it up. Without the construction industry, we don't have a civilization. Everything crumbles down. You don't live in anything. You can't work anywhere. You don't have any roads to drive on. The construction industry is literally the vehicle to have a civilization. And I think construction, maybe going back to that humility aspect of it, they don't see it that way, because they're doing their job. They're building the building. They have the internal pride of, hey, look at that building. I was a part of that. But they don't take it that next step further. So first, it's just really just getting the confidence and seeing it from maybe somebody else's vantage point of admirer of the industry, that there's no way I could build any building. You would not want to go into a building that I've built. It would fall down on top of your head. So I am fully dependent on the construction industry, and very willingly to admit that. The second thing is just start doing it. It's not that complicated. I think people really just hype it up in their head of, oh, I have to, in order to tell a story, I have to go as big as I possibly can. Have a huge video production crew, have everything well thought out, and all these big marketers. That's not true. Everybody has a phone. Flip it on and selfie and just do something. Take a picture of the job site. Take a picture of, you give a 30-second quick down and dirty video of your thoughts on what's happening in the industry. Put it out there. The more raw, the better.
Or even just speaking up in a meeting, or speaking up in a conference, or like, speaking out of anything. I think this whole idea of, if you don't try, you can't get better. And so many folks have never done it before, so they're hesitant to try. So I think that's an amazing point of, absolutely, like, you start with square one of, if you valuable, you bring valuable to this industry, and your questions are worthy. And the first time you ask a question or you post something, it's probably going to suck, but the next one's going to get better, and it's going to get better, and it's going to get better. Yeah. But there are ways to get better. And I, as someone who am not a natural storyteller, I fit more of the sporadic construction technologist that, doesn't know how deep or high level to go on things. And you can lose people. And so I think there's a lot that we as industry can learn from storytellers, and vice versa. And maybe I'll put you on the spot, Todd, a little bit, because we were talking before this about your Todd's takes and how much I've enjoyed them, but also how challenging they are to do, to really distill these conversations down. So I don't know how you want to talk to kind of that challenge, or how you've been tackling taking all this information you're bringing in and distilling it into meaningful sentences.
Well, you just convicted me, Nathan, without realizing it, because one of the thoughts I had while you were just talking was people are so afraid of looking stupid. And I think that's a big draw of why they don't post, is they're like, well, I don't really have anything to say. I'm going to be silly and stupid. And with the Todd takes, that's actually one of my kind of insecurities around doing the Todd takes. Every single episode is, I have to come up with something so kind of profound about this episode. And sometimes, this is not a knock on any of the episodes. It's a great episode, but there's nothing super groundbreaking or profound about it. And so I feel like I'm just saying the same stuff, and I'm like, well, or it's maybe outside of my comfort zone. And I'm like, well, how am I supposed to speak to that? So that don't be afraid to look stupid comment. That's convicting.
One thing I've learned, just to combat your own fears of that, is that it's okay to be repetitious, right? Because certain people may listen to just that episode, but not another one, because of their relationship with that person. So at least they're getting some of your core messages, and that, the better, each time you deliver that message, you get better at it. And because I definitely have the tendency to always want to deliver a different message each time, because I think everybody's listening to every single thing. But really having, James Bennett was the best at it, right? Of delivering a consistent message that really resonates with the crowd and can really, grow a movement.
And in respect to that, I'm going to take you back, because what is a Todd take for anybody that hasn't listened to it?
Yes.
So that's a Nathan Woodism that I'm making you do, is whenever we use a term that you don't know, we go back and explain it. So, Todd, what is a Todd take?
So at the end of every episode, every conversation on Bridging the Gap, I have 3 takeaways that I've kind of distilled 30, 40 minutes of conversation to, hey, these are the three things that stuck with me. Not necessarily the most important things that came up, but this is when I always listen back to the episode, or even when I'm in the episode, I'll be taking notes and jotting some stuff down of like, oh, that was a cool statement. So it's the three things that stand out the most to me, or me kind of encouraging or pointing at the construction industry of do better. But usually it's an encouraging note or something that stood out to me.
Yeah, I usually find them as pretty inspirational or pretty good recap of what's going on, which I like, because you're always looking for those. We'll go to a Rob McKinney. We're always looking for those nuggets that you get out of it. So, and if you haven't listened into Todd's show, I should have said this already. It's the only other podcast besides the ones that I'm on that I can remember. So it's bridgingthegappod.com. So go check it out, because it is really worth it. And I have found myself listening to even some of my own friends. And so I'm going to call you on one that was groundbreaking, that you opened my eyes to. Jake Olson's episode opened my eyes to how much of a culture freak, and you had already brought up the culture of the industry. So I thought this would be a good one. He was a culture freak that I didn't even know around how you operate a business and how you work with employees, et cetera. So I'm wondering, thinking through your own groups of guests, are there a couple that stand out that really, opened your eyes or taught you something about somebody you didn't know already, that you thought you did maybe?
Yeah, it's a great and difficult question. I remember Jake's episode as well too. We geeked out on the personality profiles and stuff with Enneagram, which was really fascinating. You want to get me to geek out, we could go down that road for sure. Because I think it's super fascinating, the personality makeup of people and how that impacts them. One of the episodes that kind of comes to mind is Rebecca Lewis. She had this great story. She works at Allison Smith, and she started as a graphic designer, but then switched over to electrical design work. And she compared the graphical design that her creative outlet was in now designing and doing these beautiful 3D rendering sketches of electrical design work, and just her passion for the actual day-to-day job was really fascinating and gripped me. She had this great story of how design really kind of saved her life in a lot of ways and helped her kind of flourish into who she is. And so it was just really the pride that she had in her work. That's what stood out to me. Outside of that, any episode where I think we're gonna talk about one topic and then there's a totally surprise loophole. Jake's is a great example of that. I thought we were gonna go down one rabbit path and then all of a sudden we're squirrel moment and we veer into something totally different. And if I can get lost in the conversation and just like forget about the time clock or anything else around, those are the special moments for me. And that happens a lot because maybe I'm easily distractible, or excitable. I don't know. Take your pick.
I believe that's called flow state, according to Angela Duckworth, right?
Yep. You're foreshadowing again, although you gave me that word foreshadowing back at the beginning, because for some reason I had a brain fog over what that was. But I think you're right, Todd. It's easy to go down those rabbit holes with the guests that we have an opportunity to interview, because this industry is full of people that are so much more than the surface. Mm-hmm. I mean, in listening into anybody who's bringing people on, we just have an opportunity and I think a little bit of a obligation to tell their stories. Cause I'm like you, I only got into construction cause I'm an IT person and I make that same joke on stage all the time. You really don't want the thing above your head to be something that I tried to install, cause probably not going to go so well. But I also didn't understand what innovation in this industry meant. So I'm kind of interested. I know you've asked that question a lot over time. What does innovation mean to you? And what have you learned about it? Probably more importantly, over time in construction, what does innovation really mean?
It means something different to every single person. I started asking that question. I ask it at the end of every episode. And I was like, this is going to be a throwaway. I'm going to get the same answer. I'm going to get rid of this question really quickly. And then I found out that it was not the same answer at all. there's certain themes that have popped up, but it is dramatically different. And some people take it as, really narrowly defined, and it's, innovation of what's the next technology, and this is the next kind of iteration of it. And then some people are like huge, big picture, and they go super philosophical on what does innovation mean. But I think that the biggest thing is how do you have enough proactivity? That's not a word. Proactiveness to find the 1% improvements and constantly never settle for the status quo. No matter how that looks to you in your context, if you're always striving for what's next. My high school swim coach always had a saying that be pleased but never satisfied. He said that at nauseum. I didn't like it in high school, but I like it now, and it's stuck with me all these years later. And I think that that's innovation. Be pleased but never satisfied. Keep on searching for this one little detail over here could be better. We can push the envelope a little bit more over here. When you do that, you really start to, you might not see it in the day-to-day, but when you take the long view and you look back, you see a huge mountain has been climbed.
Mic drops. And you've been taking the tough questions too. I mean, I kind of feel like I have to throw one more tough one at you because
Bring it.
You've been in an amazing role as a marketer for a construction software and service sales company. Like it's as Jeff knows, as others know, that's a tough role to be in, and to really justify the value of what obviously we see. But how does it lead to eyeballs or sales or whatever? Like, do you have to combat that? Are you in a culture where you're kind of insulated from that? How have you been able to balance that this long?
Maybe this isn't the answer I should say publicly, but I'm going to do it anyway. I don't necessarily care about that because my philosophy, just in marketing in general, if you focus on what are the topics and the issues and the problems and the situations that are happening in real life, everything else is going to take care of itself. If we, as applied software, if we can be focusing on some of the more difficult kind of cultural conversations or some of the even technology adoptions, but on the business side of things. So that's one of the kind of conversations that I like to have a lot is what are the building blocks of a company that you need, culture and your business model and different things like that to make technology successful. Because as I think we all will more than agree on, you can't just throw technology at a problem and expect the technology to fix it. It's not. You could have the best technology in the world, and if you have bad processes in place, the technology is frankly going to make it worse. So you have to have these building blocks, and the culture aspect, I think, is way more important than the right technology. So if we can talk about what's going on those broad trend lines and the undercurrents that are moving into the industry, that gives us credibility, it gives us compassion, which is even more important with our end user because we're hearing their pain and what they're talking about. And the technology issue, that becomes secondary. And once you have the credibility and the compassion element, they're going to be way more willing to sit down and listen to what you have on the technology solution front because they know that you care. So I care way more about those kind of, this sounds trite, but the thought leadership categories than how do I market this product? Because nobody cares about the product at the end of the day.
Well now they care about the problem.
That's right.
Well said, my friend. It's they care about the problem, but a lot of times it's defining that problem, right? And getting them to understand, and for having us to understand that problem. We've had a lot of this technology that we talk about for years. We've had a lot of the philosophy changes in construction for years that people like to talk about IPD and design build like they were invented yesterday. And it's like they're 30, 40, 50 years old at times, depending on which person. And if you're listening and I got it wrong, fine. But we can all say they're multiple decades old, right? And it's really that we haven't defined the problem set that we have so we can apply those things, those innovations, those technologies, whether they're process technology, their actual technology. That's all been there. And I think it's been an eye-opener that most of us haven't and didn't until you get into this industry, see some of the things you did, about how wrong people are about kind of where the industry is as a whole. and then started articulating the problems so we could start helping the industry overcome them. And that's been the role of the new storyteller in this industry. So I'm with you. I think sometimes there's far too much placed on the, we've got to sell them this thing. And it's like, well, you know this, and I'm sure Applied knows this. If you sell them the wrong piece of technology, you don't have just one set of rework, you have two. You know what I mean? So I'm wondering what other lessons that you've learned over the time as a marketer, but also, I mean, Applied does sell technology, services, you have a set of things that you provide customers, and obviously you have customers or we don't get to have the conversation. So what are some of the things you've learned and some of the ways you've helped companies or Applied's helped companies take that step forward?
Yeah. The biggest thing is on, make Nathan feel good using this word, interoperability. And how do you sync the different technologies and softwares together? And so from our vantage point at Applied, we have thousands of customers. And now as part of Graitec, we have, thousands of customers worldwide. So we see the different vantage points of what's working well in certain segments of the industry. Why is it working well? And we can kind of crowdsource that information out to a specific client of, obviously we protect all the confidential information, but this is what's working. You can use Revit in this way, and here's an example of it, and here's how it improved, and here's the efficiency gains that they got from that. So I think being able to see that, how everything is being operated, how are people creatively coming up with different solutions as well too. That's one of the things. We also have an IP division of the company that creates our own IP, kind of picking up on where the Autodesk products may leave off, or a workflow that is needed for the industry but is not included in out of the box Revit or the ACS platform and everything. So we have different products that kind of pick up some of that workflow, because we see those trend lines and we see the again that crowdsourcing kind of concept of it. So that's the biggest thing, is being able to just see a bigger picture, bigger scope.
Yeah, and I love the interoperability. I mean, Nathan, that's got to have you jumping to ask or to jump in on.
Well, I have more of a thought actually that this whole conversation has led me to, of almost the irony that over the last almost 20 years of selling BIM and pushing BIM as something that will eliminate RFIs or eliminate submittals, that Procore, a 20-something-year-old company that's fundamentally based on RFIs and submittals, has IPO'd and done all these things in the meantime. And so there's so much of this, how do you balance selling the vision of where we know we should be and what the customer is asking for, but also talking about the reality of where we are and literally bridging that gap, which is a perfect title for a podcast, and very much where we're at. And so I think just, to tie a loop around this whole conversation, Todd, give me your thoughts. I just think this is very cool, and you're in such a great place, and we're so thankful to have your voice to help us, better tell these stories that are very nuanced and very confusing, and we need to tell them to a broader audience than just MEP or just GCs or just architect engineer and to a broader audience.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating. Well, a thing that was sticking with me most of last week is I was talking with a guest before we haven't recorded the episode yet. We were just kind of doing a pre-call, and she was talking about the kind of the aspirational concepts of big things like the sustainability, and that it can seem so just big and daunting to a lot of people. And we don't take the time to pare it down to what is the practical kind of individual storyline for the person laying floors. How does their day-to-day work? How does that impact the larger goal of sustainability? We just talked about the pie in the sky stuff. And I think, Nathan, that kind of goes along with what you're saying of how do you do the right now versus the future casting. I think as a general rule, we spend so much time focused on where we need to go as an industry, which is needed. It's great. But we cannot lose sight of what's the practical step-by-step to get there. Because just like you can't throw technology at a problem, you can't throw aspirations at a problem and think that it's going to fix itself either. You got to have the follow-up.
I was really hoping it could.
Yeah. Hey, I love it. Dream big. I think it's great. But you got to have the practical rule in construction. I think one of the, Jeff, I'm circling back to something that you had asked earlier. Well, it's another thing that I've kind of learned. Construction does maybe this is controversial. Construction does a bad job planning on the front side. And it's such a reactive business. And obviously stuff comes up when you're doing a project. And so it has to be reactive. But some of that could be solved if people just got together in a room before everybody started, went around in a circle, shared what they were talking about or shared what they were going to do. Here's my plan. Here's kind of my top priorities. And got on the same page and planned it out on the front side. I know that's radical, but it could solve a lot.
A little bit, an ounce of planning goes miles, my friend. It's pounds of reward that you reap. And I mean, there's no hiding that's why I'm in the pre-construction space at Join. That's why I do what I do. That's why I took my career and jumped where I did, because I think that getting better at planning, getting better at decision making, getting better at that teaming phase of things is the critical path to achieving a lot of these big goals that have been set out. Like, how do you get there is dead right. You said it, and I'm going to jump back to an episode with Wyatt Jenkins on the show where he said, everybody likes to talk about the moonshot. He said, I'm here to build a ladder to the moon, which is one rung at a time. Right? You can have a moonshot, but we need ladder builders. We need people out there that are building each step, that are, giving a reason for that, that tiler to do things a little bit differently, maybe use different materials, maybe be planned better and get a, better throughput so that ultimately, they're not starting and stopping and carrying so many things around. Like, we have to connect those dots or we're never going to get there. And I'm going to say, I think it was Jonathan Marsh that said this, but I'm probably wrong about it. But somebody said, we have an industry that gets so much credit for being great problem solvers, but really, should they be? Or are they just so damn used to it that they got great at it because they have to? Because I don't really think if you ask all these folks in construction, whether they're a tiler, a framer, a mechanical, an electrical, that they really want to be freaking pro problem solvers. I think they want to be really good at installing and creating and building. So maybe they're just happenstance that they have to be problem solvers. And I wonder what you think about, you've heard that, Todd, over and over, that they're great problem solvers. But now that I've put it in that light, any thoughts?
Yeah, this strikes a chord for sure. I think it goes right into the planning aspect of it. If you plan on the front side and you have it really detailed out, that doesn't totally take off the table that you're going to have to make adjustments. It just makes it easier and makes it more flexible when you get to the problem that needs to be tweaked on the job site. Makes it easier and quicker to kind of swat off like a flea, that whatever, we knew this was coming up. Here's our contingency plans, and you move on. So I think that statement is spot on, because it doesn't make you necessarily a problem solver anymore. It just kind of makes you following along with the plan, and then focus your creativity on what you do best. And that's creating and building really awesome things that I can't do.
Exactly. I'd love to see more creative people than problem solvers. Yeah. Nathan?
So as the resident elder industry perspective, which is weird to say, I'm usually not the elder in many things, but I have a couple points. So yes, and there is a difference between dynamic planning and static planning. So there is way too much planning in this industry that is to a static level, very detailed, that one pin drops and the whole thing falls apart. And so there is a different way of planning that is more lean and agile, that we need to spend more time on and less time in the static planning. Absolutely. And I do think that from a problem solving standpoint, there is still, like, that's why, as someone who came out of civil engineering, I went to construction because I knew it would be more problem solving than structural engineering would be, because you're further upstream. And my argument from a BIM world is that you're still solving the problem. You're just doing it in a virtual world. You're building it once virtually and solving it there, so that the downstream is that much more efficient. Because you could equate that to telling a firefighter, like, hey, your entire career, you're never going to put out a fire. Like, well, I kind of became a firefighter to put out fires. So, like, you go to construction to solve problems, but we have to sell them that those problems do still exist. And I can tell you, as someone currently remodeling a 100-year-old home with laser scanning and BIM and all, in the city of Denver permitting agencies and all sorts of things, like, it's never going to be easy. It's a ton of people coming together to do really tough things. So the more we can improve our communication through that generates dynamic planning, I think would be my 2 cents or 4.
So to spin off the dynamic planning aspect of it, I think that's spot on. Yes, and on the dynamic planning, if you think of it as you're planning how people are going to think and the kind of the framework of it, you don't have to plan every single tiny little detail on. It's not an instruction manual when you get to the job site of do step A, step B, because that's never going to work. It's going to fall apart on step A. But if you plan kind of the broad brushstrokes of when you come to a problem, here's kind of the priorities to think through it. Here's the goal that we're trying to accomplish on this stuff, that you empower the person even more than what they are now to adapt and think on the fly and be creative with it. But you also give them the kind of the flexibility to move quicker. So it's planning the framework and the thinking of it, not necessarily every single nitty gritty detail of it, because that's going to go out the window. Does that make sense?
Can I argue with myself? Because now I want to go back on what I said, because there's a difference between a change management. Because you're right, when we're talking about a change management or an RFI, something that has to change, that we need everything you just said. There is something to having a lot of detail into this particular component, this particular part involves all these steps, and it's baked into, but is also dynamic because it's interoperable, and it knows where it exists in the world, and it knows its predecessors and successors, and it's not static. It's actually parametric in sense. And so then you can actually build these things out and find more logical constraints in your schedule, in theory. But I can tell you right now, there are not very many companies or projects, except for maybe some of the mega projects to a limited extent, that are doing that. But that's not to say the technology is not there. It's just a people and a process thing, and sometimes a demand thing. Is there a business case to do that? Because on certain size projects, it is probably that's what our brains are amazing abilities to do. But when you're trying to do that across 15 different people, you can't quite do that. You need a system to be able to start organizing that. So there is a point of diminishing returns to both sides of either having it in one person's head or having it distributed a bunch of others through some sort of a data system. Mm. Just out in cloud 9 over here. Yeah, I'm doing all kinds of IT speak, and I don't know what I'm talking about. But most of the industry folks listening, I hope that I understand. Otherwise, I'm just losing it.
Somewhat, No, I actually there's a balance there. So you're never going to not have problems. You're never going to not have problems in business. I just think that we are spending way too much time solving problems that could have been planned better, but we're also not doing a really good job, and haven't been doing a really good job along the way of making sure that, value and intent from the designers and the owners and the architects and the engineers makes it to the projects themselves, so that in the end, the consumers of that built environment are having the experience that they necessarily should. And you hear me say that very particular, that I did not go to the owners, because the owners, they have value that they want to get out of it, but most of them are actually creating an experience, whether it's a stadium, a hospital, a road, a bridge, any of that actually we're all experiencing. And if the value isn't driven and given to that building or that product, then we don't get to experience that as well. And I always want to take that one step further. So,
and that's actually a great segue, Jeff, into the topics for our upcoming summit. Is that one of the lessons learned from last year is we were too broad in our project types, that we didn't pick specifically a DOT funded highway project or bridge project or, a private owner. And because if you don't have the context of who that owner is in their particular case, you can't make a valid business case, because all of those business cases are going to be different. So I think that's just, you pointed out the nuance of what we're dealing with. And if we don't focus specific and then draw higher level correlations from it, I think, that's the bridging the gap that we've been talking about.
Well, and on that, I want to ask, Todd, because what we're talking about is we've got the AEC Integration Summit coming, sponsored by the CPC, that's being put on in February here, and all three of us will be there. Not surprisingly, in some form or fashion, maybe even have a microphone in front of us at times and teams in front of us at times, because I think it's one of the few times in the industry we actually do more of a workshop and have been able to move the ball forward. But Todd, you and the team at Applied have really invested in this as well. And I'm interested to understand, why would you guys get behind what's going on at the CPC, especially with the AEC Integration Summit, and give us a little bit of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, we and I specifically are huge fans of CPC for sure, because it goes back to what we were talking about before on if we can talk about those kind of trends and the thought leadership content, and we focus on making just better business cases for construction, then the technology stuff, that helps start to kind of fix itself, and people are more open and more receptive to technology coming into. But we have to change the mindset, and I think CPC is doing a great job, Nathan, with you are top of the list of helping to change and really influence mind share in the industry, which is something really cool and something that I really appreciate of CPC. Of you're not afraid to have those hard conversations and bring people on to be really open and vulnerable, not necessarily just on their work side, but also who they are as a person and what kind of the baggage, for lack of a better term, that they bring to the table, because we all bring our own baggage, our own insecurities to our day-to-day work. And you have to be able to talk about that and address that in a real or organic and compassionate way in order to be able to even remotely begin to touch on technology. Because if you don't, you're just burying your head in the sand, and technology and innovation is never happening until you fix, and not fix, but until you address and are willing to have the conversation about who the person is as a person.
I love this. I've never said it before. Making it a safe place for subject matter experts to share their insecurities or their stupid questions or what XYZ. And I think that's absolutely the intention of where we're at, is that we're a bunch of really smart people from different silos of the industry that need to come together and form common language. So I think together the three of us and all the other 80 to 100 folks that'll be there are the right folks in the room that are changing the industry, and that it's not selling any software, even though there's a bunch of software providers there. It's saying like, hey, we've all got the same problems, and if we can't come up with some like consistent answers to them that can lead the direction of roadmaps and public policy and XYZ, we're not doing our job. And so I think, I'm excited to see, again, round two, what comes out of it, and how we've learned from lessons last year, and how we continue to iterate and create platforms that actually lead to real meaningful change.
Yeah, I love the shared pains concept. It's a great hashtag. Succinct concept.
Marketers don't typically like it because it is a negative connotation. So thank you, Jeff, for bringing in the shared gains. I feel like you get some credit for bringing in the shared pains to shared gains, but because it's both, right? Like if we don't address the shared pains, do that root cause, go into that trough of disillusionment, we can't come out of the other side and find that slope of enlightenment.
Right.
So I think modeling that, at least in a prototypical sense, in a safe space, in a conference room, makes us feel more comfortable doing it on a real project at the kickoff, just the way you described, Todd, because that's been my vision since being part of those meetings on IPD projects in the Bay Area back in the day. But those projects are few and far between, and that needs to be everyone's project. And even when you have that contract, doesn't mean we've solved all the people in the process issues. It just means we have a better opportunity to solve them.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that has stayed with me since last year's conference was I loved being a observer and kind of fly on the wall into some of the groups and seeing the light bulb moments go off on the shared pains side of things of, wait, you experience that as well? I never thought that your persona had to deal with that. I only thought it from my side. And yeah, there are nuances to what we're both experiencing together, but they had this tie then that connected them of, oh, okay, we're both dealing with this. We're coming in from different perspectives, but we're talking about the same thing, but we're using all these different terms and we're using it in different ways. And that was really cool to see those light bulb moments and the kind of the friendship cord extending out to somebody that maybe they wouldn't have extended it out to prior.
Absolutely. Empathy, right?
Yeah, that is the power of that event. And so if you guys want to check out what we're talking about, Nathan, let them know where they can go check it out and maybe get to be a part of this upcoming summit, because it's not completely full yet, right?
It is not. No, there are a couple spots left on our teams, and spoiler alert, we will be extending the participant registration to the end of the week if you want to be involved. We also do, as Todd mentioned, have observer tickets for those that are not too familiar with what we're doing, but very curious to want to learn more and don't necessarily need to dive in feet first. But we've got, again, 6 topics ranging from that RFP response in the beginning of, even if it isn't IPD, how can we start to change the game up front and how we respond to RFPs, to how would you define that work package up front based on a common work breakdown structure at the beginning of the job, to how we design handoff, whether it's the engineer to fabricator to installer to whoever's ultimately servicing that project. There's all kinds of design handoffs across the supply chain, to how do we tag locations, whether it's an issue in RFI that came up or the status of something as it's progressing through that supply chain. Location tagging is an important topic, as well as who's responsible for it. That ball in court is a big one. And then ultimately the financial performance, because ultimately what is the most digitized and the most reported is our financial performance, that WIP statement. And so the better we can get at reporting those things upstream from project to financial to surety, we can, I think, gain a lot of headway with some shared gains there. So yeah, excited to dive into all of those. You can head to constructionprogress.org and just look for that. It'll pop up right there for the AEC Integration Summit to learn more and sign up.
Well, that is an easy way for everybody to go there. Before we go into the news, though, I wanted to give Todd one of those last moments. So what are you looking forward to in 2023, Todd? I no prep on this one. Kind of what's your forecast of 2023 or your focus or intention for this year?
Work-wise or just in general?
Just in general, man.
I'm hoping it's honestly a little quieter of a year. Last year, my wife had our 4th kid, and we moved houses in the same month. Our first night in the new house was the day we came home from the hospital with the 4th baby, which is not advisable. Was not a good plan.
What were you saying about planning more or something?
That's right.
It's the knowing doing gap is quite large. I understand it.
That's right. Might not always practice what I preach there, but such is life. So hopefully a little quieter year this year. But yeah, we'll just keep on rocking and rolling. I want to dive into telling the stories, and Applied Software has been acquired by the Graitec group, and so that's an international company. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is to be able to kind of spread our wings some and tell more international stories on how construction as a whole across the globe is doing, and where are the learnings that we can do, because every region does it a little bit different, and the kind of natural curious person in me is, well, why? should it be that way? I get that there's, different regulations and stuff in different parts of the world, but what can we learn from the UK and bring over to the States, and what can we export over to the UK that we're doing really well? And maybe what we think we're doing well, we're not doing as well. So I'm excited to dive into some of those stories.
Yeah, that's awesome. I would agree. Maybe you need a little bit of work on change management there. Maybe you need to manage those changes a little bit. But then again, probably wasn't as predictable on closing and all those things, so we won't throw too many stones. And you're right. This industry is a global industry, and we recently had Fred Mills on. It started the B1M in the UK, and he's told the US stories and stories around the world. And I think we have to continue to get more connected and learn more from the rest of the world. So I'm looking forward to what you've got in 2023. With that, I'd love to continue, but you're going to stick around for the construction technology news of the weeks. Before we get into the news, let's listen in on the second half of the conversation I had with Robert Scheer, VP of Strategy and Business Development at OpenSpace. And I'm back with Robert Scheer, VP of Strategy and Business Development for OpenSpace. There's a lot of reality capture out there, a lot of 360 products out there. What really sets OpenSpace apart?
From the start, we really focused on speed and simplicity. If you want your field teams to use stuff, it better be easy, it better be fast. And so our focus is 100% on making life easier for people to build stuff. All our advanced tech is wrapped in a really super simple experience. It just works the first time, every time. And it works at the speed of construction, which to us means getting things turned around in less than an hour, so that if you walk at 7 a.m, by 8 o'clock, you can share that with your team and you can coordinate work and kind of track issues.
Awesome. Well, so who is really the OpenSpace product focused at? Are you looking at trade contractors, general contractors, owners? Who's your real, users?
Yeah, it's really all of the above. I think we started focusing on GCs, and I'd say that's probably most of our users. But now we've got real strong adoption with trades. A lot of owners are writing it right into the spec for the project. With the GCs, it's a lot of capturing maybe every other day, once a week, to really provide that context for the team. Trades tend to use them a lot more actively. They're using them to track progress, track team productivity. And then owners, again, love to have that sort of oversight and visibility into the project. We've got 100,000 active users on the platform. We've got our users have captured over 10 billion square feet in over 70 countries. And more of our customers are moving from using OpenSpace on 1 or 2 projects to really using it across their whole project portfolio.
That's awesome. Where can they learn more about OpenSpace?
Yeah, I'd point them to 2 places. One is openspace.ai. Check it out, look around. If you want to learn more, there's request a demo buttons all over the place. Click that. The other one is we're going to be at a ton of trade shows and conferences, both sort of national ones like AU and Groundbreak, but also regional ones. So if you go to openspace.ai/events and see a calendar and, stop by and say hi.
All right, Nathan, take it away. What's your news stories for us this week?
So I am a little bit late to sharing this, but very exciting news coming here out of Colorado. Trimble announced that they have acquired Rivet. If you're not familiar with Rivet, they are a big CPC longtime supporter. Tom Stem, their CEO, is our board of directors chairman. And again, it's a very, I think, exciting move for interoperability, our word of the day here, and the advancements for it, and really this need for whether it's a project site or an e-builder or a Viewpoint or a Procore or a Nuforma or Autodesk Construction Cloud, you name it, all these different project management platforms are going to have to talk to each other because each of these stakeholders have their own systems. And so, Rivet, I think, is really head and shoulders out there as the leader in this, CDX integration platform as a service, iPaaS. And so excited to see what that additional funding and support and resources from Trimble will do to accelerate those efforts. Jeff, what do you think? Do you agree?
Well, no, I do. And if you know anything about the way podcast recording goes, we record a week before we release these days. So we should look like Nostradamus if it wasn't for that, because the episode that we just recorded last week, which is, oh gosh, I just lost my train of how it would work for everybody listening. But basically with Always AI last week in the news, at the end of that episode, we talked about what 2023 is really going to look forward to from Iron Pros, which was integration, acquisition were two of the major topics. And then Rivet was in the integration portion, and we talked about Trimble and Autodesk and others in the acquisition. So to see it, I think it's a natural fit for where it goes. For me, there's this misunderstanding that in our world of technology that acquisition is necessarily a bad thing. And I think, Todd, you're sitting in a unique position where, you all have been acquired, but 90% of all software companies end their journey in acquisition, right? And that's not because what we hear about is the few bad ones, or what we like to talk about is the few bad ones that weren't planned well or didn't go well. But ultimately, many of the products that you use today are actually an acquisition at some point in time, and then an incorporation of that acquisition. We can go through Autodesk's, half of their what as ACC these days were portions and pieces of Vela systems or other acquisitions they've made along the way. And then interoperability. If we do not start flowing data between these systems and we continue to make construction struggle with data silos, and we're just piling on unusable raw materials that do have a cost. And so we can talk all about saving costs in the field, but shifting those to data costs is not a good thing either. So I wonder, Todd, what's your kind of and congratulations to Rivet, and congratulations to Tom, and congratulations to Trimble. Jordan Lawver that's over there, it's in a leadership position. I think this is a fantastic opportunity to connect a lot of things that they have, but also play a larger role, I hope, in connecting other things to their systems and to start thinking outside of our own ecosystems. It's necessary. Apple plays with Microsoft, Netflix plays with LG and every other phone builder, or TV builder. These are things we have to do to grow to the potential that we actually have. So, Todd, I'm wondering what your thoughts are, especially given that you've been acquired at Applied.
Yeah. I echo what you both said for sure. It's exciting news that has come out. The acquisition, it's a good thing. I don't think people should fear it. We're a year almost into our acquisition, and all positive things, and definitely some exciting stuff coming out from our front. But one of the things that kind of stood out to me, Jeff, while you were talking a couple months back at MEP Force, I was on stage with Amy Marks, and she was really talking about the expected experience that construction should have, and what do we do in our personal lives of Amazon. We expect that package to be at our door in 2 days, and we can change whatever customization that we want. And I think I'm excited to see that come into construction. I think Rivet is doing some really cool stuff on the interoperability side of things that hopefully starts pulling in some of that expected experience stuff. Because construction, we shouldn't kind of settle for what we think has been done in the past. We should challenge it. And if we do it in our personal life, why can't we have that in the construction technology space? So excited to see where all that goes.
Well said. And shout out to Chris Papler too. I know at Trimble, he was very critical in orchestrating all this happening. So yeah, excited to see what comes from that. Moving on in my posts, I don't normally post, and frankly, I don't know about you guys. I kind of get annoyed with all the new job alert or you get in LinkedIn, but one that is worth sharing because those of us in the construction dorks world know Trent Leinenbach, and he has gone over to what I would say the dark side, software and technology services and development, but it's with Jonathan Marsh, so I guess that makes it okay. It evens it out, right? But he's over at Steel Toe Consulting, so congrats to Trent, and excited to see what happens with that new flexibility to just let loose and dork out on stuff, because I think Trent's a rare breed that understands the business case, can empathize with the field, and also can actually develop some software, which I certainly come nowhere close to. So kudos for him, and excited to see what happens over there. And I'll just dive into my last one, and we can get any thoughts, because really it's a segue into the fact that we are having Trent's just one of numerous colleagues and others that are great construction technologists within AEC firms and leave for one reason or another. So we did do a survey this year with help from Brick and Mortar Ventures, Alice Leung, and Yuhi with the YOPS, as well as the NAWIC group, to try and find out more about why are our industry's best and brightest leaving. Is there correlation with different DEI demographics and other things? So some really interesting findings, especially if you're a data nerd. You can download the executive summary, the detailed report, and learn more. And again, if you're with us in Denver on February 9th, we'll be sharing more of those findings, as well as actually digging into how we address some of the findings that are in there through sort of that workshop activity. And again, Todd will be there helping me lead that.
Yeah, I want to jump on a couple of things there. One, congratulations to Trent, and in true Trent fashion, he's thought following Jonathan. And if you don't know, Trent's the one who coined the thought follower hashtag, which, by the way, it's epic. I think that's a great way to poke a little bit of fun at all of ourselves, because we need a little bit of humor in our world. But it's an interesting thing to talk about, is that, you are seeing a lot of people move around and leave, and that's natural in business. So it's especially Trent doing it, leaving North Mechanical, where he had a stellar career and a stellar company that supported him along the way. And then I know the team at North, and I know they're not happy to see him leave by any means, because no one is happy to see a good person like that leave, but they're also super supportive of him on his journey, because I think he can have a much bigger impact on the industry as a whole. And we're going to start to see that. Like that's the normal part of, as an organization, you're never going to prevent everybody from leaving. And in fact, you really shouldn't, because people have to have new and different experiences and grow. And you need to invest in them and know that that investment will pay itself back to you. I was on a run earlier this week, and I heard an interesting quote that was, you've got to plant the seeds of trees whose shades you'll never experience. That's what good leaders and great leaders do right now. And it's about sending people off and treating them better. It is about learning why they're leaving, and understand if you have some negative culture, you have some negative environments that you need to pick. But ultimately, it's also just about adapting to the new world. It's different for all of us right now. I'll also say, in predecessing where we're going to go as a part of the show, one of the trends that I want to highlight is people leaving industry and going to technology. But you're actually also seeing the same. We just don't highlight it as much, but technology is now going back into construction. That bi-directional cross-pollination is how other industries have really reached where they need to go. One of my great mentors, Steve Peck, in years past, when he offered me to come into software development and where I found my love for it, he said, look, man, either way, you want to know how to be great at implementing new software and being an IT person, then walk a mile in our shoes, learn how we build it. You'll ask better questions, you'll do better things. So for me, this just fits with the trend, and the survey itself starts to give people opportunities to think. So I know I went on my high horse there. Todd, what are your thoughts on, you see this live and in person, the back and forth between technology and between companies and people coming and going. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, you said it really well. That cross-pollination is, that shouldn't be feared. That's a good thing, because it's going to lift those tides. And I see that mindset shifting in construction some, and maybe it's the injection of us millennials getting older and starting to have maybe a bit more influence in and pulling everybody over to the dark side of that. But I think that's a good thing. That you invest in the employee, not to necessarily get a benefit to you, which that seems kind of counterintuitive. And you're going to see that if you really genuinely are invested in that person, you're going to see the benefit back to you. But you may not, and that's okay. Do it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll give another shout. My friend Ryan Friend, that was here at Join, is now over at STO Building Groups. Tiffany Willard, who was over here at Join, is now over at Revisto. We're all moving around to find the right places. And I wish all of you you find the right place, you grow, but don't be afraid to leave either. And don't be afraid to look for new opportunities across paths. We need y'all to really work with all of us across the way. So to all those people that are making those moves or thinking about those things, just enjoy yourselves and do the right thing for yourselves and support each other. So thanks, Nathan. That was great stuff, man. I really appreciate it. I am going to jump into my news, which is a little less, a little more on the techie side of things. So this is a cool one for me. Riddle solved. I had a lot of fun, and this was shared by a couple of folks. So if you're one of the ones who shared it on LinkedIn or on Twitter, I appreciate you. Riddle solved. Why was Roman concrete so durable? And this is from MIT News. It's an unexpected ancient manufacturing strategy may hold the key to designing concrete that lasts for millennia. Interesting thing is that concrete in our world is one of the larger pieces of carbon that we're producing. So it's really important, and there's been a ton of research done, but we have not been able to figure out and hadn't been able to figure out what the ancient Romans had figured out in their engineering and construction of vast networks of roads. To this day, there's aqueducts and pieces of buildings. The Rome's famed Pantheon, et cetera, are still here. When certain structures we've built in modern day, the concrete decays faster. And what they've stumbled upon is that maybe some of the things that were originally thought were just because the mixtures were dirty, some of the volcanic ash, some of the other things that they found were key ingredients of the concrete are actually the reasons that these forms of concrete are lasting longer. Lime cast, volcanic ash, other materials that were found in it. And it's funny that this historical piece of technology and innovation has been hard for us to recreate. So I thought it was interesting. Sometimes, we all want to look to the future, but we really need to look to the past and see if we can't figure it out. And a lot of the times when we look into the past, we have a tendency to brush aside things that in the end we learn later, much later on, were very intentional. So interesting. I just thought this was a cool article for people to take a read on. Todd, you going to go into concrete science after this one?
Well, I love history. So I saw this and definitely dove into it because I was fascinated by it. I think what stands out to me is we try to outsmart ourselves so much. And we think that adding complexity to it and like really sitting down and like, let's be really studious about this and intellectual is going to come up with a better solution. We're really just keep it to KISS, keep it simple, move on. Like we don't need to overcomplicate things. I love it that it's this simplistic thing that was right there in front of our face, literally the entire time. And we just thought that we were smarter. We need to have a healthy respect for the past.
You got it, Nathan.
I'll echo that, but I am very curious. The question I had in my head was the next thing they need to solve is the structural, unknown mystery of like Stonehenge or like any of these like massive, huge rocks. Is like, how the heck did they get these into place? Like, I still want to know that. Like, that's the stuff that still perplexes me. But just to this point of, so much of innovation is about going back and understanding the components that came together to make the current state the way it is, because that's the only way you're going to deconstruct it and build a better future is by understanding how the current state came to be. So, the best way to create that ladder is by, building a good foundation underneath it, right? And understanding where things came from and second guessing it, right? Which in this case, they're always going back and second guessing. And so we can always use a healthy dose of that, even though it may set our deadlines back or cause us to have to replan.
Well, and I think we can find the things that we use to reinforce it, and then they can also find other materials that we can add to it, because we know we've found certain materials for self-healing concrete, et cetera. So it's not that we're going to stop building with it. We just got to be more effective with it and be more innovative, but also sometimes you got to look to the past to understand where the future might go. So that was a great one for me. I'm going to end it with this one, and this is a TED Talk. It's a book that I know, Nathan, you're reading right now. I read over the summer. But this is an awesome talk by Angela Lee Duckworth on grit, the power of passion and perseverance. This is a little 6-minute video you can watch on TED. Nathan and I think, started our friendship based on which TED Talks that we really liked. But grit is really about understanding that your level of intelligence, which we're really, really good at understanding and measuring from an academic perspective, is not the best indicator of how you are going to do and how you are going to perform. And I think far too often in academia and in other areas, we look at these as the predictors of how people are going to go, when ultimately it is more about the grit that you have as a human to continue to look at life as a marathon and not a sprint. And those that take their gifts and invest in them and try and work through them, and those that leave their gifts behind and forget that it takes hard work. And that someone who may not be as gifted on a scale that is measurable from that perspective can far outshine others because of their grit, because of their determination, because of their willingness to learn and not hang on to just innate intelligence. Some of the most intelligent people I've found over the world and over the years are ones who are learn-it-alls, to use an Adam Grant, instead of know-it-alls. I can't stand sitting across from a know-it-all because there's not a lot of great conversation, but a learn-it-all who can sit there and listen. And I find that, most of the people I get the chance to meet here are learn-it-alls. So for me, I wonder, I'm going to start with you, Todd, on grit and on this idea of not just measuring intelligence, but, looking at the other parts that go into it.
Yeah, I love it. I love the whole concept of grit and what she has been putting out there. I'm a big fan. I think it's hard to measure, though, how much grit somebody has, because one of the biggest indicators is how do you fail, pick yourself up, learn from how you failed, and still go back into the arena and do combat just as intensely as you did before, kind of putting off the fear of failing again, because you already did that. So what's the worst that could happen? You're just going to learn and pick yourself up again. But how do you measure that? Because nobody likes to talk about failure, especially in construction. That's a big 4-letter word. Don't touch. But yeah, I think if we could kind of lower the stigmatism around failing and find a measurement for that, we need to definitely invest in how have you failed, how have you learned from that failure, and that's worth way more than whatever IQ score you can throw out there.
So I admit I have not taken it yet, but there is a grit score that I'm now reading about that you can go on there and submit. And as with any personality assessment or anything else, it's going to be subjective. Like, you can answer it a certain way if you want to get a certain result back. It takes a certain amount of humility and openness and honest with yourself that certain people just will never have. And I don't know how to help them. Hopefully we can all get by without them. But I think that the biggest thing I've learned, at least from the book, and hopefully some of this is captured in the video as well, is that grit isn't just something that you have or you don't have. Like, it is very malleable and it can change over time. And that like one of the words, tenacity, like your ability to like see things through, is one side of it. But there are other sides around passion and perseverance and other more longstanding aspects. So I think I've learned a lot about kind of myself through it, and I think a lot of us that are in construction certainly have a lot of grit. But understanding what type of grit and what drives your grit is a huge part of, I think, what we can all learn from this and find careers that are really fulfilling and make us happy and make the world a better place.
I would agree. And I'll go to, if you're a Peloton rider, you'll know this one. I thought about it the whole time I was listening to Grit, is from Robin Arzon, is you've survived 100% of your worst days. Now let's get up off the mat and go again. And that's really, your grit does change depending on where you are. So, and if you're in construction and you're in technology, I think you have to have grit or you ain't going to make it. So with that, I want to thank both of you for sitting down. I can't believe it's been this long to finally get you on as a guest, Todd. Maybe it was that you were the reigning champ. And
I think there was some competition going on there. Yeah, there might have been some animosity. I'm glad I could diffuse that for everyone here. CPC is doing
thanks,
our
David.
job.
And we wouldn't be anywhere without the crew leading the way. I mean, you guys paved the road for sure on all construction podcasting. So thanks for already laying the foundation and making it super easy to add an extra ring to that ladder.
Hey, that's awesome. We are building that ladder thanks to building that ladder to that moonshot. It takes all of us. It takes co-opetition. It takes us all kind of working together. Nathan, well, thanks for sitting down and keeping that microphone and that office warm. I'll probably see you in a few hours.
We'll see you soon, buddy.
All right. And thank all of you for tuning in today to geek out for our interview with Todd Weyandt. To read all of our news stories, learn more about apps, workflows, and hardware, and to listen to this show, visit thecontechcrew.com. This is the ConTech Crew signing out. Until next time, enjoy the ride and geek out.